Chapter 1: When Wolves Ran Free in Paris. I, the Sieur Louis de Conte, was born in Neufchâteau on the 6th of January, 1410. That is to say, exactly 2 years before Joan of Arc was born in Domrémy. My family had fled to those distant regions from the neighborhood of Paris in the first years of the century. In politics, they were Armagnacs, patriots. They were for our own French king, crazy and impotent as he was. The Burgundian party, who were for the English, had stripped them and done it well. They took everything but my father's small nobility, and when he reached Neufchâteau, he reached it in poverty and with a broken spirit. But the political atmosphere there was a sort he liked, and that was something. France had fallen low, so low. For more than 3/4 of a century, the English fangs had been bedded in her flesh, and so cowed had her armies become by ceaseless rout and defeat that it was said and accepted that the mere sight of an English army was sufficient to put a French one to flight. I was sent to Domrémy, to the priest, whose housekeeper became a loving mother to me. The priest, in the course of time, taught me to read and write, and he and I were the only persons in the village who possessed this learning. At the time that the house of this good priest, Guillaume Fronte, became my home, I was 6 years old. We lived close by the village church, and the small garden of Joan's parents was behind the church. As to that family, there was Jacques d'Arc the father, his wife Isabelle Romy, 3 sons, Jacques, 10 years old, Pierre, 8, and Jean, 7, Joan, 4, and her baby sister Catherine, about a year old. I had these children for playmates from the beginning. I had some other playmates besides, particularly 4 boys, Pierre Morel, Eddie and Rose, Noel Rain-Gesson, and Edmund Aubry, whose father was mayor that time, also 2 girls, about Joan's age, who by and by became her favorites. One was named Homeda, the other was called Little Menjet. These girls were common peasant children, like Joan herself. When they grew up, both married common labourers. Their estate was lowly enough, you see, yet a time came, many years after, when no passing stranger, howsoever great he might be, failed to go and pay his reverence to those 2 humble old women who had been honored in their youth by the friendship of Joan of Arc. John Huss and his sort might find fault with the church. In Domrémy it disturbed nobody's faith. And when the split came, when I was 14, and we had 3 popes at once, nobody in Domrémy was worried about how to choose among them. The Pope of Rome was the right one. A pope outside of Rome was no pope at all. Every human creature in the village was an Armagnac, a patriot. And if we children hotly hated nothing else in the world, we did certainly hate the English and Burgundian name and polity in that way. Our Domrémy was like any other humble little hamlet of that remote time and region. It was a maze of crooked, narrow lanes and alleys shaded and sheltered by the overhanging thatch roofs of the barn-like houses. The houses were dimly lighted by wooden-shuttered windows, that is, holes in the walls which served for windows. The floors were dirt, and there was very little furniture. Sheep and cattle grazing was the main industry. All the young folks tended flocks. In the earliest times, 100 knights from many remote places in the earth would have gone in there one after another to kill the dragon and get the reward. But in our time that method had gone out, and the priest had become the one that abolished dragons. Père Guillaume Fronte did it in this case. He had a procession, with candles and incense and banners, and marched around the edge of the wood and exorcised the dragon, and it was never heard of again, although it was the opinion of many that the smell never wholly passed away. Not that any had ever smelt the smell again, for none had. It was only an opinion, like that other, and lacked bones, you see. I know that the creature was there before the exorcism, but whether it was there afterward or not is a thing which I cannot be so positive about. And in return for this attention, the fairies did any friendly thing they could for the children, such as keeping the spring always full and clear and cold, and driving away serpents and insects that sting. And so there was never any unkindness between the fairies and the children during more than 500 years. Tradition said 1,000, but only the warmest affection and the most perfect trust and confidence. And whenever a child died, the fairies mourned just as that child's playmates did. And the sign of it was there to see. For before the dawn on the day of a funeral, they hung a little immortelle over the place where that child was used to sit under the tree. I know this to be true by my own eyes. It is not hearsay. And the reason it was known that the fairies did it was this, that it was made all of black flowers of a sort not known in France anywhere. Now, the several traditions were, as I've said, some believing one and some another. One of them I knew to be the truth, and that was the last one. I do not say anything against the others. I think they were true, but I only know that the last one was, and it is my thought that if one keep to the things he knows, and not trouble about the things which he cannot be sure about, he will have the steadier mind for it, and there is profit in that. Now, one thing that does make it quite likely that there were really two apparitions of the tree is this fact. From the most ancient times, if one saw a villager of ours with his face ash-white and rigid with a ghastly fright, it was common for everyone to whisper to his neighbor, "Ah, he is in sin, and has got his warning." And the neighbor would shudder the thought and whisper back, "Yes, poor soul, he has seen the tree." All the children pleaded for the fairies, and said they were their good friends and dear to them and never did them any harm. But the priest would not listen, and said it was sin and shame to have such friends. The children mourned and could not be comforted, and they made an agreement among themselves that they would always continue to hang flower wreaths on the tree as a perpetual sign to the fairies that they were still loved and remembered, though lost to sight. Edmund Aubrey's mother passed by the tree, and the fairies were stealing a dance, not thinking anybody was by, and they were so busy and so intoxicated with the wild happiness of it, and with the bumpers of juice sharpened up with honey which they had been drinking, that they noticed nothing. So Dame Aubrey stood there astonished and admiring, and saw the little fantastic atoms holding hands, as many as 300 of them, tearing around in a great ring half as big as an ordinary bedroom, and leaning away back and spreading their mouths with laughter and song, which he could hear quite distinctly, and kicking their legs up as much as 3 inches from the ground in perfect abandon and hilarity. Oh, the very maddest and witchingest dance the woman ever saw. We all flocked to Pere Fronte, crying and begging, and he had to cry, too, seeing our sorrow, for he had a most kind and gentle nature, and he did not want to banish the fairies, and said so, but said he had no choice, for it had been decreed that if they ever revealed themselves to man again, they must go. This all happened at the worst time possible, for Joan of Arc was ill of a fever and out of her head, and what could we do who had not her gifts of reasoning and persuasion? We flew in a swarm to her bed and cried out, "Joan, wake, wake, there is no moment to lose. Come and plead for the fairies. Come and save them. Only you can do it." It was a bitter day for us, the day that Pere Fronte held a function under the tree and banished the fairies. We could not wear mourning that any could have noticed. It would not have been allowed. So we had to be content with some poor small rag of black tied upon our garments where it made no show. But in our hearts we were mourning, big and noble and occupying all the room. For our hearts were ours. They could not get at them to prevent that. The great tree, El Arbre de Beaumont was its beautiful name, was never afterward quite as much to us as it had been before, but it was always dear, is dear to me yet when I go there now, once a year in my old age, to sit under it and bring back the lost playmates of my youth and group them about me and look upon their faces through my tears and break my heart. Oh, my God, no, the place was not quite the same afterward. In one or two ways it could not be, for, the fairies' protection being gone, the spring lost much of its freshness and coldness, and more than 2/3 of its volume, and the banished serpents and stinging insect returned, and multiplied, and became a torment and have remained so to this day. When that wise little child, Joan, got well, we realized how much her illness had cost us, for we found that we had been right in believing she could save the fairies. She burst into a great storm of anger, for so little a creature, and went straight to Pere Fronte, and stood up before him where he sat, and made reverence and said, "The fairies were to go if they showed themselves to people again. Is it not so? If a man comes prying into a person's room at midnight when that person is half naked, will you be so unjust as to say that that person is showing himself to that man? Is a sin, anyway, even if one did not intend to commit it?" Pere Fronte threw up his hands and cried out, "Oh, my poor little child, I see all my fault. And he drew her to his side and put an arm around her and tried to make his peace with her. But her temper was up so high that she could not get it down right away, but buried her head against his breast and broke out crying and said. The good father hugged her yet closer to his side and said, But I can't stop right away. I've got to. And it is no little matter. This thing that you have done. Is being sorry penance enough for such an act? Pere Fronte turned away his face, for it would have hurt her to see him laugh, and said, Oh, thou remorseless but mostest accuser. No, it is not. I will put on sackcloth and ashes. There, are you satisfied? Yes, that will do, if it will clear you. How, Father? Take the ashes and put them on my head for me. The matter ended there, of course. The victory was with the priest. One can imagine how the idea of such a profanation would strike Joan or any other child in the village. She ran and dropped upon her knees by his side and said, Oh, it is dreadful. I didn't know that that was what one meant by sackcloth and ashes. Do please get up, Father. Oh, you have done nothing to me. Father, it is yourself that must forgive yourself for wronging those poor things. Please get up, Father, won't you? But I am worse off now than I was before. I thought I was earning your forgiveness, but if it is my own, I can't be lenient. It would not become me. Now what can I do? Find me some way out of this with your wise little head. The pair would not stir, for all Joan's pleadings. She was about to cry again. Then she had an idea, and seized a shovel and deluged her own head with the ashes, stammering out through her chokings and suffocations. There, now it is done. Oh, please get up, Father. The old man, both touched and amused, gathered her to his breast and said, Oh, you incomparable child. It's a humble martyrdom, and not of a sort presentable in a picture, but the right and true spirit is in it, that I testify. Then he brushed the ashes out of her hair, and helped her scour her face and neck and properly tidy herself up. He was in fine spirits now, and ready for further argument. So he took his seat and drew Joan to his side again, and said, Joan, you were used to make wreaths there at the fairy tree with the other children. Is it not so? That was the way he always started out when he was going to corner me up and catch me in something. Just that gentle, indifferent way that fools a person so, and leads him into the trap, he never noticing which way he is traveling until he is in and the door shut on him. He enjoyed that. I knew he was going to drop corner long in front of Joan now. Joan answered, Yes, Father. Did you hang them on the tree? No, Father. Didn't hang them there. Why didn't you? Well, I didn't wish to. No, Father. What did you do with them? Yes, I thought it must be wrong. I suppose so. Yes, I think so. He stuttered a minute, and I judged he was going to spring his trap, and he did. He said, Then the matter stands like this. They were banned creatures, of fearful origin. They could be dangerous company for the children. Now give me a rational reason. If you can think of any, might you call it a wrong to drive them into banishment, and why you would have saved them from it. In a word, what loss have you suffered by it? How stupid of him to go and throw his case away like that. I could have boxed his ears of vexation if he had been a boy. He was going along all right until he ruined everything by winding up in that foolish and fatal way. What had she lost by it? Was he never going to find out what kind of a child Joan of Arc was? Was he never going to learn that things which merely concerned her own gain or loss she cared nothing about? Could he never get the simple fact into his head that the sure way and the only way to rouse her up and set her on fire was to show her where some other person was going to suffer wrong or hurt or loss? Why, he had gone and set a trap for himself. That was all he had accomplished. The minute those words were out of his mouth, her temper was up, the indignant tears rose in her eyes, and she burst out on him with an energy and passion which astonished him, but didn't astonish me, for I knew he had fired a mine when he touched off his ill-chosen climax. God and the King. But now, oh, now, all is lost, everything is lost, and there is no help more. Then she finished with a blast of that idea that fairy kinsmen of the fiend ought to be shunned and denied human sympathy and friendship because salvation was barred against them. She said that for that very reason people ought to pity them and do every humane and loving thing they could to make them forget the hard fate that had been put upon them by accident of birth and no fault of their own. Poor little creatures, she said. What can a person's heart be made of that can pity a Christian's child and yet can't pity a devil's child, that 1,000 times more needs it? Ah, me, poor children, poor fiends, they have rights. And she said true, I never thought of that. God forgive me, I am to blame. Speaking of this matter reminds me of many incidents, many things that I could tell, but I think I will not try to do it now. It will be more to my present humor to call back a little glimpse of the simple and colorless good times we used to have in our village homes in those peaceful days, especially in the winter. In the summer, we children were out on the breezy uplands with the flocks from dawn till night, and then there was noisy frolicking and all that. But winter was a cozy time. Winter was a snug time. She was hospitable to them all, for an animal was an animal to her, and dear by mere reason of being an animal, no matter about its sort or social station. And as she would allow of no cages, no collars, no fetters, but left the creatures free to come and go as they liked, that contented them, and they came. But they didn't go to any extent, and so they were a marvelous nuisance, and made Jack d'Arc swear a good deal. But his wife said God gave the child the instinct, and knew what he was doing when he did it. Therefore it must have its course. It will be no sound prudence to meddle with his affairs when no invitation had been extended. Everything was going fine and breezy and hilarious, but then there came an interruption, for somebody hammered on the door. It was one of those ragged road stragglers. The eternal wars kept the country full of them. He came in, all over snow, and stamped his feet, and shook, and brushed himself, and shut the door, and took off his limp ruin of a hat, and slapped it once or twice against his leg to knock off its fleece of snow, and then glanced around on the company with a pleased look upon his thin face, and a most yearning and famished one in his eye when it fell upon the victuals. And then he gave us a humble and conciliatory salutation, and said it was a blessed thing to have a fire like that on such a night, and a roof overhead like this, and that rich food to eat, and loving friends to talk with. Ah, yes, this was true, and God help the homeless, and such as must trudge the roads in this weather. Sit down. This thunder blast was from old Jack d'Arc, and Joan was the object of it. The stranger was startled, and took his hand away, and there was Joan standing before him offering him her bowl of porridge. The man said, God Almighty bless you, my darling, and then the tears came, and ran down his cheeks, but he was afraid to take the bowl. Do you hear me? Sit down, I say. I know not if he is a rascal or no, but he is hungry, father, and shall have my porridge. I do not need it. If you don't obey me, I'll. Rascals are not entitled to help from honest people, and no bite, no sup shall they have in this house. Joan. She set a bowl down on the box and came over, and stood before her scowling father, and said, Father, if you will not let me, then it must be as you say, but I would that you would think. Then you would see that it is not right to punish one part of him for what the other part has done, for it is that poor stranger's head that does the evil things. But it is not his head that is hungry, it is his stomach, and it has done no harm to anybody, but is without blame, and innocent, not having any way to do a wrong, even if it was minded to it. Please let. I will differ with you there, gossip, and will undertake to show the company. Here he looked around upon us and nodded his head in a confident way, that there is a grain of sense in what the child has said. For look you, it is of a certainty most true and demonstrable that it is a man's head that is master and supreme ruler over his whole body. Is that granted? Will any deny it? He glanced around again. Everybody indicated assent. Very well. Then, that being the case, no part of the body is responsible for the result when it carries out an order delivered to it by the head. Ergo, the head is alone responsible for crimes done by man's hands or feet or stomach. Do you get the idea? Am I right thus far? Everybody said yes, and said it with enthusiasm, and some said, one to another, that the mayor was in great form tonight and at his very best, which pleased the mayor exceedingly and made his eyes sparkle with pleasure, for he overheard these things. So he went on in the same fertile and brilliant way. Now, then, we will consider what the term responsibility means, and how it affects the case in. Responsibility makes a man responsible for only those things for which he is properly responsible, and he waved his spoon around in a wide sweep to indicate the comprehensive nature of that class of responsibilities which render people responsible, and several exclaimed, admiringly, "He is right. He has put that whole tangled thing into a nutshell. It is wonderful." After a little pause to give the interest opportunity to gather and grow, he went on, "Very good. Let us suppose the case of a pair of tongs that falls upon a man's foot, causing a cruel hurt. Will you claim that the tongs are punishable for that? The question is answered. I see by your faces that you would call such a claim absurd. Now, why is it absurd? It is absurd because, there being no reasoning faculty, that is to say, no faculty of personal command, in a pair of tongs, personal responsibility for the act of the tongs is wholly absent from the tongs, and therefore, responsibility being absent, punishment cannot ensue. Am I right? A hearty burst of applause was his answer. Now, then, we arrive at a man's stomach. Consider how exactly, how marvelously, indeed, its situation corresponds to that of a pair of tongs. Listen, and take careful note, I beg you. Can a man's stomach plan a murder? No. Can it plan a theft? No. Can it plan an incendiary fire? No. Now answer me. Can a pair of tongs? There were admiring shouts of no, and the case is just exact, and don't he do it splendid? Now, then, friends and neighbors, a stomach which cannot plan a crime cannot be a principal in the commission of it. That is plain, as you see. The matter is narrowed down by that much. We will narrow it further. Can a stomach, of its own motion, assist at a crime? The answer is no, because command is absent, the reasoning faculty is absent, volition is absent, as in the case of the tongs. We perceive now, do we not, that the stomach is totally irresponsible for crimes committed, either in whole or in part, by it. He got a rousing cheer for response. Then what do we arrive at as our verdict? Clearly this, that there is no such thing in this world as a guilty stomach, that in the body of the veriest rascal resides a pure and innocent stomach, that whatever its owner may do, it at least should be sacred in our eyes, and that while God gives us minds to think just and charitable and honorable thoughts, it should be, and is, our privilege, as well as our duty, not only to feed the hungry stomach that resides in a rascal, having pity for its sorrow and its need, but to do it gladly, gratefully, in recognition of its sturdy and loyal maintenance of its purity and innocence in the midst of temptation, and in company so repugnant to its better feelings. I am done. Well, you never saw such an effect. They rose, the whole house rose, and clapped, and cheered, and praised him to the skies, and one after another, still clapping and shouting, they crowded forward, some with moisture in their eyes, and wrung his hands, and said such glorious things to him that he was clear overcome with pride and happiness, and couldn't say a word, for his voice would have broken, sure. It was splendid to see, and everybody said he had never come up to that speech in his life before, and never could do it again. Eloquence is a power, there is no question of that. Even old Jack Dock was carried away, for once in his life, and shouted out, "It's all right. Joan, give him the porridge." She was embarrassed, and did not seem to know what to say, and so didn't say anything. It was because she had given the man the porridge long ago, and he had already eaten it all up. When she was asked why she had not waited until a decision was arrived at, she said the man's stomach was very hungry, and it would not have been wise to wait, since she could not tell what the decision would be. Now that was a good and thoughtful idea for a child. He had been in the wars for years, and the things he told and the way he told them fired everybody's patriotism away up high, and set all hearts a thumping and all pulses a leaping. Then, Before anybody rightly knew how the change was made, he was leading us a sublime march through the ancient glories of France, and in fancy we saw the titanic forms of the 12 paladins rise out of the mist of the past and face their fate. We heard the tread of the innumerable hosts sweeping down to shut them in. We saw this human tide flow and ebb and flow, and waste away before that little band of heroes. We saw each detail pass before us of that most stupendous, most disastrous, yet most adored and glorious day in French legendary history. Here. And now, in the solemn hush, the stranger gave Joan a pat or two on the head and said, "Little maid, whom God keep, you have brought me from death to life this night. Now listen, here is your reward." And at that supreme time for such a heart-melting, soul-rousing surprise, without another word he lifted up the most noble and pathetic voice that was ever heard, and began to pour out the great Song of Roland. Also she was called the Beautiful, and this was not merely because of the extraordinary beauty of her face and form, but because of the loveliness of her character. These names she kept, and one other, the Brave. Look, what is that? When one exclaims like that in a way that shows astonishment and apprehension, he gets attention. All the panting breasts and flushed faces flocked together, and all the eager eyes were turned in one direction, down the slope toward the village. You can see for yourself that it is nothing else. It is a black flag. Sure? Now, has any ever seen the like of that before? Mean? It means something dreadful. What else? That is nothing to the point. Anybody knows it without the telling. But what? That is the question. It is a chance that he that bays it can answer as well as any that I hear, if you contain yourself till he comes. Some named one, some another, but presently also that it was Etienne Rose, called the Sunflower, because he had yellow hair and a round pockmarked face. His ancestors had been Germans some centuries ago. He came straining up the slope, now and then projecting his flagstick aloft and giving his black symbol of war a wave in the air, whilst all eyes watched him, all tongues discuss him, and every heart beat faster and faster with impatience to know his news. At last he sprang among us, and struck his flagstick into the ground, saying, "There, stand there and represent France while I get my breath. She needs no other flag now." All the giddy chatter stopped. It was as if one had announced a death. In that chilly hush there was no sound audible but the panting of the breath-blown boy. When he was presently able to speak, he said, "Black news has come. A treaty has been made at Troyes between France and the English and Burgundians. By it France is betrayed and delivered over, tied hand and foot, to the enemy. It is the work of the Duke of Burgundy and that she-devil, the Queen of France. It marries Henry of England to Catherine of France. Is not this a lie? Marries the daughter of France to the butcher of Agincourt? It is not to be believed. You have not heard aright. Now that is certainly a lie, for it runs counter to our Salic law, and so is not legal and cannot have effect," said Edmund Aubrey, called the Paladin, because of the armies he was always going to eat up some day. He would have said more, but he was drowned out by the clamors of the others, who all burst into a fury over this feature of the treaty, all talking at once and nobody hearing anybody, until presently Haumette persuaded them to be still, saying, "It is not fair to break him up so in his tale. Pray let him go on. You find fault with his history, because it seems to be lies, that were reason for satisfaction, that kind of lies, not discontent. Tell the rest, Etienne. There is but this to tell. Our king, Charles VI, is to reign until he dies. Then Henry V of England is to be regent of France until a child of his shall be old enough to." Then everybody shouted at once and said the news was a lie, and all began to get cheerful again, saying, "Our king would have to sign the treaty to make it good, and that he would not do, seeing how it serves his own son." That viper? Certainly. Nobody is talking of her. Nobody expects better of her. There is no villainy she will stick at, if it feed her spite, and she hates her son. Her signing it is of no consequence. The king must sign. I will ask you another thing. What is the king's condition? Mad, isn't he? You say right. Jack Dark. Well, what would you of one that is mad? Does he know what he does? No. Does he do what others make him do? Yes. Now, then, I tell you he has signed the treaty. But many reports come that are not true. Nothing so shameful as this has ever come before, nothing that cuts so deep, nothing that has dragged France so low. Therefore there is hope that this tale is but another idle rumor. Where did you get it? The cure of Maxie brought it. Did he believe it? He did, and that is not all. He said he knew it to be true. Some of the girls began to sob. The boys were struck silent. The distress in Joan's face was like that which one sees in the face of a dumb animal that has received a mortal hurt. The animal bays it, making no complaint. She bore it also, saying no word. Her brother Yak put his hand on her head and caressed her hair to indicate his sympathy, and she gathered the hand to her lips and kissed it for thanks, not saying anything. Presently the reaction came, and the boys began to talk. Noel Raingesson said, "Oh, are we never going to be men? We do grow along so slowly, and France never needed soldiers as she needs them now to wipe out this black insult. As for me, I'm not going to wait much longer," said the paladin, "and when I do start, you'll hear from me. I promise you that. There are some who, in storming a castle, prefer to be in the rear. But as for me, give me the front or none. I will have none in front of me but the officers." Even the girls got the war spirit, and Marie Dupont said, I would I were a man. I would start this minute," and looked very proud of herself, and glanced about for applause. "So would I," said Cecile Letelier, sniffing the air like a warhorse that smells a battle. "I warn you I would not turn back from the field though all England were in front of me." "Pooh," said the paladin, "girls can brag, but that's all they are good for. Let 1,000 of them come face to face with a handful of soldiers once, if you want to see what running is like. Here's little Joan. Next you'll be threatening to go for a soldier." Well, he kept it up like that till he made their sides ache with laughing, which was quite natural, for certainly it was a very funny idea. At that time, I mean, the idea of that gentle little creature that wouldn't hurt a fly and couldn't bear the sight of blood, and was so girlish and shrinking in all ways, rushing into battle with a gang of soldiers at her back. Poor thing! She sat there confused and ashamed to be so laughed at, and yet at that very minute there was something about to happen which would change the aspect of things, and make those young people see that when it comes to laughing, the person that laughs last has the best chance. One by one the boys and girls crept out, and we stood there gazing, open-mouthed, till those two entered the village and were hid from sight. It was then that we named her the Brave. "That is all well enough," said little Menjet, "but he is a madman, day, and so his likings and his gratitude and friendliness go for nothing when his rage is up. You did a perilous thing." "Yes." "Didn't you feel afraid?" It made everybody laugh. Then the sunflower said it was like a lamb trying to think out how it had come to eat a wolf, but had to give it up. There was silence for a time, and perhaps we were all thinking of the same thing, namely, what a poor figure we had cut in that adventure as contrasted with Joan's performance. I tried to think up some good way of explaining why I had run away and left a little girl at the mercy of a maniac armed with an axe, but all the explanations that offered themselves to me seemed so cheap and shabby that I gave the matter up and remained still. But others were less wise. Noel Raingesson fidgeted a while, then broke out with a remark which showed what his mind had been running on. "The fact is, I was taken by surprise. That is the reason. If I had had a moment to think, I would no more have thought of running, that I would think of running from a baby. For, after all, what is Theophile B knowest? That I should seem to be afraid of him? Pooh! The idea of being afraid of that poor thing. I only wish he would come along now. I'd show you." "So do I," cried Pierre Morel. "If I wouldn't make him climb this tree quicker then, well, you'd see what I would do. Taking a person by surprise. That way, why, I never meant to run. Not in earnest, I mean. I never thought of running in earnest. I only wanted to have some fun. And when I saw Joan standing there and him threatening her, it was all I could do to restrain myself from going there and just tearing the livers and lights out of him. I wanted to do it bad enough. And if it was a do-over again, I would. If ever he comes fooling around me again, I'll... Oh, hush, said the paladin, breaking in with an air of disdain. The way people talk, a person would think there's something heroic about standing up and facing down that poor remnant of a man. Why, it's nothing. There's small glory to be got in facing him down, I should say. Why, I wouldn't want any better fun than to face down 100 like him. If he was to come along here now, I would walk up to him just as I am now. I wouldn't care if he had 1,000 axes, and say. And so, in the end, they all got back their self-respect. Yes, and even added somewhat to it. Indeed, when the sitting broke up, they had a fine opinion of themselves than they had ever had before. It was truly a dismal year for France. One day we had been over to have one of our occasional pitched battles with those hated Burgundian boys of the village of Maxey, and had been whipped, and were arriving on our side of the river after dark, bruised and weary, when we heard the bell ringing the tocsin. We ran all the way, and when we got to the square we found it crowded with the excited villagers, and weirdly lighted by smoking and flaring torches. The people stormed and raged at him, and you could see dozens of them stretch their fists above the sea of torch-lighted faces and shake them at him, and it was all a wild picture, and stirring to look at, and the priest was a first-rate part of it, too, for he stood there in the strong glare and looked down on those angry people in the blandest and most indifferent way, so that while you wanted to burn him at the stake, you still admired the aggravating coolness of him. And his winding up was the coolest thing of all, for he told them how, at the funeral of our old king, the French king-at-arms had broken his staff of office over the coffin of Charles VI and his dynasty, at the same time saying, in a loud voice, God grant long life to Henry, King of France and England, our sovereign lord. And then he asked them to join him in a hearty amen to that. The people were white with wrath, and it tied their tongues for the moment, and they could not speak. But Joan was standing close by, and she looked up in his face, and said in her sober, earnest way, I would I might see thy head struck from my body. Then, after a pause, and crossing herself, if it were the will of God, she did her work quickly and with decision and despatch, and soon turned the panic flight into a quiet, steady-going march. You will grant that for so young a person, and a girl at that, this was a good piece of work. A considerable part of our village was destroyed, and when it became safe for us to venture back there, we realized what other people had been suffering in all the various quarters of France for many years. Yes, decades of years. For the first time we saw wrecked and smoke-blackened homes, and in the lanes and alleys carcasses of dumb creatures that had been slaughtered in pure wantonness, among them calves and lambs that had been pets of the children, and it was pity to see the children lament over them. And so she went on talking about it and growing more and more troubled about it, until one could see that it was filling all her mind. At last we came upon a dreadful object. It was a madman, hacked and stabbed to death in his iron cage in the corner of the square. It was a bloody and dreadful sight. Hardly any of us young people had ever seen a man before who had lost his life by violence, so this cadaver had an awful fascination for us. We could not take our eyes from it. I mean, it had that sort of fascination for all of us but one. That one was Joan. She turned away in horror, and could not be persuaded to go near it again. It is a striking reminder that we are but creatures of use and custom. Yes, and it is a reminder, too, of how harshly and unfairly fate deals with us sometimes. For it was so ordered that the very ones among us who were most fascinated with mutilated and bloody death were to live their lives in peace, while that other, who had a native and deep horror of it, must presently go forth and have it as a familiar spectacle every day on the field of battle. You may well believe that we had plenty of matter for talk now, since the raiding of our village seemed by long odds the greatest event that had really ever occurred in the world. For although these dull peasants may have thought they recognized the bigness of some of the previous occurrences that had filtered from the world's history dimly into their minds, the truth is that they hadn't. One biting little fact, visible to their eyes of flesh and felt in their own personal vitals, became at once more prodigious to them in the grandest remote episode in the world's history which they had got at second hand and by hearsay. It amuses me now when I recall how our elders talked then. They fumed and fretted in a fine fashion. "Aye, yes," said old Jack d'Arc, "things are come to a pretty pass. Indeed, the king must be informed of this. It is time that he cease from idleness and dreaming, and get at his proper business." He meant our young disinherited king, the hunted refugee, Charles VII. "You say well," said the mayor. "He should be informed, and that at once. It is an outrage that such things would be permitted. Why, we are not safe in our beds, and he taking his ease yonder. It shall be made known. Indeed it shall. All France shall hear of it." To hear them talk, one would have imagined that all the previous 10,000 sackings and burnings in France had been but fables, and this one the only fact. It is always the way. Words will answer as long as it is only a person's neighbor who is in trouble, but when that person gets into trouble himself, it is time that the king rise up and do something. Look at Dunois, bastard of Orleans. Call him a general. Just put me in his place once. Never mind what I would do. It is not for me to say. I have no stomach for talk. My way is to act and let others do the talking. But just put me in his place once. That's all. And look at Saintrailles. Pooh! And that blustering Lahire. Now what a general that is. It shocked everybody to hear these great names so flippantly handled, for to us these renowned soldiers were almost gods. In their far-off splendor they rose upon our imaginations dim and huge, shadowy and awful, and it was a fearful thing to hear them spoken of as if they were mere men, and their acts open to comment and criticism. The color rose in Joan's face, and she said, "I know not how any can be so hardy as to use such words regarding these sublime men, who are the very pillars of the French state, supporting it with their strength and preserving it at daily cost of their blood. As for me, I could count myself honoured past or deserving if I might be allowed but the privilege of looking upon them once, at a distance, I mean, for it would not become one of my degree to approach them too near." "Look you," said the paladin, "it is easy to say that. Now I will tell you why I remain chafing here in a bloodless tranquility which my reputation teaches you is repulsive to my nature. I do not go because I am not a gentleman. That is the whole reason. What can one private soldier do in a contest like this? Nothing. He is not permitted to rise from the ranks. If I were a gentleman, would I remain here? Not one moment. I can save France. Ah, you may laugh, but I know what is in me. I know what is it under this peasant cap. I can save France, and I stand ready to do it, but not under these present conditions. If they want me, let them send for me. Otherwise, let them take the consequences. I shall not budge but as an officer. Since you sniff so at others, why don't you go to the wars yourself, Pierre d'Arc?" They all laughed, and the dragonfly said, "He will go sooner," said Joan. She said it in a low voice and musingly, but several heard it. "How do you know that?" "Joan," said the dragonfly with a surprised look. But Jeanne d'Arc broke in and said, she said it as one who talks to himself aloud without knowing it, and none heard it but me. I glanced at her and saw that her knitting needles were idle in her hands, and that her face had a dreamy and absent look in it. There were fleeting movements of her lips as if she might be occasionally saying parts of sentences to herself. But there was no sound, for I was the nearest person to her and I heard nothing. But I set my ears open, for those two speeches had affected me uncannily, I being superstitious and easily troubled by any little thing of a strange and unusual sort. There is one way to let France have a chance for her salvation. We've got one gentleman in the commune, at any rate. Why can't the scholar change name and condition with the paladin? Then he can be an officer. France will send for him then, and he will sweep these English and Burgundian armies into the sea like flies. Come, now, Noel continued, It's all arranged. There's nothing to do but organize under the Paladin's banner and go forth and rescue France. You'll all join." All said yes, except Jack d'Arc, who said, "I'll ask you to excuse me. It is pleasant to talk war, and I am with you there, and I've always thought I should go soldiering about this time, but the look of our wrecked village and that carved-up and bloody madman have taught me that I am not made for such work in such sights. I could never be at home in that trade. Face swords and the big guns and death, it isn't in me. No, no, count me out. And besides, I'm the eldest son and deputy prop and protector of the family. Since you are going to carry Jean and Pierre to the wars, somebody must be left behind to take care of our Joan and her sister. I shall stay at home and grow old in peace and tranquility." "He will stay at home, but not grow old," murmured Joan. The talk rattled on in the gay and careless fashion privileged to youth, and we got the Paladin to map out his campaigns and fight his battles and win his victories and extinguish the English and put our king upon his throne and set his crown upon his head. Then we asked him what he was going to answer when the king should require him to name his reward. The Paladin had it all arranged in his head and brought it out promptly. "He shall give me a dukedom, name me Premier Peer, and make me hereditary Lord High Constable of France." It was so simple and out of her heart that it touched us, and we did not laugh, but fell to thinking. We did not laugh, but there came a day when we remembered that speech with a mournful pride, and were glad that we had not laughed, perceiving then how honest her words had been, and seeing how faithfully she made them good when the time came, asking just a boon of the king and refusing to take even any least thing for herself. Chapter 6. Joan and Archangel Michael. But now for a whole year and a half she had been mainly grave, not melancholy, but given to thought, abstraction, dreams. She was carrying France upon her heart, and she found the burden not light. I knew that this was her trouble, but others attributed her abstraction to religious ecstasy, for she did not share her thinkings with the village at large, yet gave me glimpses of them, and so I knew, better than the rest, what was absorbing her interest. Many a time the idea crossed my mind that she had a secret which she was keeping wholly to herself, as well from me as from the others. This idea had come to me because several times she had cut a sentence in two and changed the subject when apparently she was on the verge of a revelation of some sort. I was to find the secret out, but not just yet. There was none to see, at least none that I was expecting. There was a barely perceptible suggestion of wonder in her serious eyes, but that was all, and she said, in a simple and placid way, "The case of France hopeless? Why should you think that? Tell me. It is a most pleasant thing to find that what you thought would inflict a hurt upon one whom you honor has not done it." I was relieved now, and could say all my say without any furtivenesses and without embarrassment. So I began. "Our king is shut up with his favorites and fools and inglorious idleness and poverty in a narrow little patch of the kingdom, a sort of backlot, as one may say, and has no authority there or anywhere else, hasn't a farthing to his name, nor a regiment of soldiers. He is not fighting. He is not intending to fight. He means to make no further resistance. In truth, there is but one thing that he is intending to do, give the whole thing up, pitch his crown into the Sieur, and run away to Scotland. They are the facts. Are they correct?" she asked in an ordinary, level tone. "Necessarily. In face of these facts, doubt of it is impossible. How could I think or feel in any other way, in the circumstances? Joan, with these fatal figures before you, have you really any hope for France, really and actually?" "Yes, the Loire. Now, then, this whole northern half of the country is in the tight grip of the English." "Yes. And this whole southern half is really in nobody's hands at all, as our king confesses by meditating desertion and flight to a foreign land. England has armies here. Opposition is dead. She can assume full possession whenever she may choose. In very truth, all France is gone. France is already lost. France has ceased to exist. What was France is now but a British province. Is this true?" Her voice was low and just touched with emotion, but distinct. Yes, it is true. Very well. Now add this clinching fact, and surely the sum is complete. When have French soldiers won a victory? Scotch soldiers, under the French flag, have won a barren fight or two a few years back, but I am speaking of French ones. Since 8,000 Englishmen nearly annihilated 60,000 Frenchmen a dozen years ago at Agincourt, French courage has been paralyzed. And so it is a common saying today that if you confront 50 French soldiers with 5 English ones, the French will run. It is a pity, but even these things are true. France will rise again. You shall see. Rise, with this burden of English armies on her back. She will cast it off. She will trample it underfoot. This with spirit. And the pauper king, he will mount his throne, he will wear his crown. Both will have happened before 2 years are sped. Indeed, and who is going to perform all these sublime impossibilities? God. Now the key did presently come into my hands, and the way that it happened was this. You have heard all the world talk of this matter which I am about to speak of, but you have not heard an eyewitness talk of it before. I was coming from over the ridge one day. It was the 15th of May, 28, and when I got to the edge of the oak forest and was about to step out of it upon the turfy open space in which the haunted beech tree stood, I happened to cast a glance from cover first, then I took a step backward and stood in the shelter and concealment of the foliage. For I had caught sight of Joan, and thought I would devise some sort of playful surprise for her. Think of it, that trivial conceit was neighbor, with but a scarcely measurable interval of time between, to an event destined to endure forever in histories and songs. The day was overcast, and all that grassy space wherein the trees stood lay in a soft rich shadow. Joan sat on a natural seat formed by now great roots of the tree. Her hands lay loosely, one reposing in the other, in her lap. Her head was bent a little toward the ground, and her air was that of one who has lost a thought, steeped in dreams, and not conscious of herself or of the world. And now I saw a most strange thing, for I saw a white shadow come slowly gliding along the grass toward the tree. It was of grand proportions, a robed form, with wings, and the whiteness of the shadow was not like any other whiteness that we know of, except to be the whiteness of lightnings. But even the lightnings are not so intense as it was, for one can look at them without hurt, whereas its brilliancy was so blinding that it pained my eyes and brought the water into them. I uncovered my head, perceiving that I was in the presence of something not of this world. My breath grew faint and difficult, because of the terror and the awe that possessed me. She had not seen the shadow yet. Had the song of the birds told her it was coming? It had that look to me. Then the like of this must have happened before. Yes, there might be no doubt of that. Presently she rose and stood, with her head still bowed a little, and with her arms down and the ends of her fingers lightly laced together in front of her, and standing so, all drenched with that wonderful light, and yet apparently not knowing it, she seemed to listen, but I heard nothing. After a little she raised her head, and looked up as one might look up toward the face of a giant, and then clasped her hands and lifted them high, imploringly, and began to plead. I heard some of the words. I heard her say, "But I am so young. Oh, so young to leave my mother and my home and go out into the strange world to undertake a thing so great. Ah, how can I talk with men, be comrade with men, soldiers? It would give me over to insult and rude usage and contempt. How can I go to the great wars and lead armies, I, a girl, and ignorant of such things, knowing nothing of arms, nor how to mount a horse, nor ride it? Yet, if it is commanded." Chapter 7, she delivers a divine command. I heard my name called. It was Joan's voice. It startled me, for how could she know I was there? I said to myself, it is part of the dream. It is all dream, voice, vision, and all. The fairies have done this. So I crossed myself and pronounced the name of God to break the enchantment. I knew I was awake now and free from the spell, for no spell can withstand this exorcism. Then I heard my name called again, and I stepped at once from under cover, And there indeed was Joan, but not looking as she had looked in the dream. For she was not crying now, but was looking as she had used to look a year and a half before, when her heart was light and her spirits high. It was not a dream. Not a dream. I said, "How can you know about it, Joan?" I suppose not. I think I am not. Do not be afraid. Indeed, there is no need. Come with me. We will sit by the spring, and I will tell you all my secret. First tell me this. You could not see me in the wood. How did you know I cut a mark in the tree? Wait a little. I will soon come to that. Then you will see. I will tell you, but do not be disturbed. You are not in danger. It was the shadow of an archangel, Michael, the chief and lord of the armies of heaven. I could but cross myself and tremble for having polluted that ground with my feet. You were not afraid, Joan? Did you see his face? Did you see his form? When was that, Joan? It is nearly 3 years ago now. So long? Have you seen him many times? It was not permitted. It is permitted now, and soon I shall tell all. But only you, now. It must remain a secret for a few days still. No one. It has fallen upon me before when you and others were present, but none could see it. Today it has been otherwise, and I was told why, but it will not be visible again to any. It was a sign to me, then, and a sign with a meaning of some kind. Yes, but I may not speak of that. Strange, that a dazzling light could rest upon an object before one's eyes and not be visible. Joan, what do they tell you? All manner of things. About France, I mean. She sighed and said, disasters, only disasters, and misfortunes and humiliation. There was naught else to foretell. They spoke of them to you beforehand? Yes, so that I knew what was going to happen before it happened. It made me grave, as you saw. It could not be otherwise. But always there was a word of hope, too. More than that. France was to be rescued and made great and free again. But how and by whom, that was not told. Not until today. As she said those last words, a sudden deep glow shone in her eyes, which I was to see there many times in after days when the bugles sounded the charge and learned to call it the battle light. Her breast heaved, and the color rose in her face. But today I know. God has chosen the meanest of his creatures for this work, and by his command, and in his protection, and by his strength, not mine, I am to lead his armies and win back France, and set the crown upon the head of his servant that is Dauphin and shall be king. I was amazed, and said, You, Joan, you, a child, lead armies. Yes, for one little moment or two the thought crushed me, for it is as you say, I am only a child and ignorant of everything that pertains to war, and not fitted for the rough life of camps and the companionship of soldiers. But those weak moments pass. They will not come again. I am enlisted. I will not turn back, God helping me, till the English grip is loose from the throat of France. My voices have never told me lies. They have not lied today. They say I am to go to Robert de Baudricourt, governor of Vaucouleurs, and he will give me men-at-arms to escort and send me to the king. A year from now a blow will be struck, which will be the beginning of the end, and the end will follow swiftly. These were tremendous sayings. They were impossibilities to my reason, but to my heart they rang true. And so, while my reason doubted, my heart believed, and held fast to the belief from that day. Presently I said, She looked surprised, and said, It is true that you will be with me when I go to the wars. But how did you know? I told her when it was that she had said them, but she did not remember about it. So then I knew that she had been asleep, or in a trance or an ecstasy of some kind. At that time, she bade me keep these and the other revelations to myself for the present, and I said I would, and kept the faith I promised. None who met Joan that day failed to notice the change that had come over her. She moved and spoke with energy and decision, There was a strange new fire in her eye, and also something wholly new and remarkable in her carriage and in the set of her head. This new light in the eye and this new bearing were born of the authority and leadership which had this day been vested in her by the decree of God, and they asserted that authority as plainly as speech could have done it, yet without ostentation or bravado. This calm consciousness of command and calm unconscious outward expression of it remained with her thenceforth until her mission was accomplished. I leave before dawn. No one will know it but you. I go to speak with the governor of Vaucouleurs as commanded, who will despise me and treat me rudely, and perhaps refuse my prayer at this time. I go first to Bioy, to persuade my uncle Laxart to go with me, it not being meet that I go alone. I may need you in Vaucouleurs, for if the governor will not receive me, I will dictate a letter to him, and so must have someone by me who knows the art of how to write and spell the words. You will go from here tomorrow in the afternoon, and remain in Vaucouleurs until I need you. He had his steel cuirass on, and wore boots that came above his knees, and was equipped with a huge sword. And when I looked at this martial figure, and heard the marvelous oaths, and guessed how little of poetry and sentiment might be looked for in this quarter, I hoped the little peasant girl would not get the privilege of confronting this battery, but would have to content herself with a dictated letter. Yes, Your Excellency. HM. A strange idea. Certainly. Bring them in. This strange speech amazed the company, and many murmured, "The poor young thing is demented." The governor scowled and said, "What nonsense is this? The king, or the dauphin, as you call him, needs no message of that sort. He will wait. Give yourself no uneasiness as to that. What further do you desire to say to me?" "That he may make me his general, for it is appointed that I shall drive the English out of France, and set the crown upon his head." "What? You? Why, you are but child." "Indeed? And when will all this happen?" There was a great and general burst of laughter, and when it had subsided, the governor said, "My lord, the King of Heaven." Many murmured, "Ah, poor thing, poor thing." And others, "Ah, her mind is but a wreck." The governor hailed Laxart and said, "Harkee, take this mad child home and whip her soundly. That is the best cure for her ailment." "You refuse me the soldiers. I know not why, for it is my lord that has commanded you. Yes, it is he that has made the command. Therefore I must come again, and yet again, then I shall have the men-at-arms." Chapter 8. Why the Scorners relented. Haumette and little Menjet and I stood by her, but the storm was too strong for her other friends, and they avoided her, being ashamed to be seen with her because she was so unpopular, and because of the sting of the taunts that assailed them on her account. She shed tears in secret, but none in public. In public she carried herself with serenity, and showed no distress, nor any resentment, conduct which should have softened the feeling against her, but it did not. Her father was so incensed that he could not talk in measured terms about her wild project of going to the wars like a man.